This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
What happened to Amy Billig, a pretty 17-year-old who vanished without a whisper in 1974? Told that her daughter had been abducted by a renegade motorcycle gang, Amy's mother infiltrated the dangerous biker world, only to come up empty-handed time and time again. Then in 1992, new evidence surfaced that Amy Billig was still alive, more than 18 years after she disappeared. In life, Walter Rice was a reclusive loner. In death, he became a beguiling mystery, a man with no known heirs and an unclaimed estate of more than $140,000. Perhaps someone watching can solve the riddle of Walter Rice. It was a car of his dreams, but Oliver Munson never imagined when he bought it that he'd become a key witness in the prosecution of a suspected auto thief. However, Oliver never testified. Just days before the trial, he disappeared, and his family fears he became the victim of foul play. Also tonight, we'll take you to Syracuse, New York for a heartwarming reunion. Thanks to our viewers, a woman's search for her past has finally come to an end. Join me. Perhaps you may be able to help solve a mystery. Thousands of people are reported missing every year. Most come home safely within a few days. Those who do not are eventually presumed to be dead. However, in the bizarre case of Amy Billig, who vanished in 1974, the passing years have produced a convincing chain of evidence that she is still alive. Tonight, we join her family in their search, one of the strangest and most provocative cases we have ever profiled. Amy Billig was 17 years old when she disappeared from her home in Coconut Grove, Florida. Amy was an accomplished musician and singer who also wrote poetry and adhered to a strict vegetarian diet. March 5th, 1974. Amy came home from school at around noon as usual. She planned to meet friends downtown for lunch. Before leaving, she called her father, Ned, at work.
Hi, Dad, it's me. I just got home from school. I'm gonna go meet Kurt and Kathy for lunch. Can I borrow $2?
Amy never did arrive at her father's business, and she never showed up for her lunch date.
All right. I'll see you soon. Bye.
I started getting a little frantic when I hadn't heard from Amy by dinner time, and I called the friend that she had said she was going to be meeting, and the girl was quite angry. She said Amy never showed up.
We interviewed all of her family, all of her friends, all of her acquaintances. We did a lot of canvassing of the neighborhood where she was last seen. We did everything we could to try to find her. You know, we checked with hospitals and morgues and police departments all over the state and all over the country.
I remember the house was like a flurry of activity. People were coming around. There was a lot of people around the house trying to help out, manning the phones, and because there's so many telephone calls coming in. The phone seemed to be ringing off the hook.
Mom!
12 days after Amy's disappearance, a frightened woman phoned with shocking news.
Hello?
The anonymous caller claimed to be a member of a motorcycle gang known as the Outlaws, and she claimed that the Outlaws had taken Amy.
Where? What?
During the 1970s, renegade biker gangs unnerved communities across the United States. Susan Billig learned that a chapter of the Outlaws, one of the most notorious gangs, had indeed thundered through Coconut Grove about the time Amy disappeared.
We had to consider that maybe Amy was abducted, kidnapped, taken away by these bikers. But it was always controversial with the police because these leads concerning the bikers were always vague and usually ended up nowhere.
However, to the Billigs, the biker connection offered a ray of hope. A family friend who had done legal work for the outlaws arranged for Amy's parents to meet with 2 gang members.
Hi, welcome to my house. I'm Susan.
Pleasure.
Won't you have a seat?
I was frightened because I had never seen people like this before in my life.
Look, I thought you guys...
And here they are in my living room. I got a feeling of revulsion and hate and love at the same time. I wanted them to give me information about my child, and that was paramount. I didn't care what they looked like.
These are pictures of my daughter. She's missing.
I ain't seen her.
No.
Look, she's got brown eyes, long brown hair, and she's 17, and she's tall and thin.
They told me that these things do happen, that the bikers will take girls and will sell them to one another for very little, like a credit card, or it takes very little to buy a girl.
I was told that you would help me.
We'll take the picture, and if she's in the Outlaw Nation, we'll let you know within 2 days.
We'll let you know.
The 2 bikers promised to ask other gang members about Amy, but they were never able to provide any information.
Amy could have been abducted and then sold from one individual to another. The old lady is a way of making money. They put her out, making the money, either topless dancing, hooking, ripping off credit cards, anything that she can do to bring home the money.
To many bikers, women, or as they called them, old ladies, were nothing more than property. Susan was stunned to learn that if Amy had been abducted, she wouldn't have been the gang's first victim.
Before I turned 13, I had been sold 4 times.
Gina Andrew was abducted by bikers at the age of 12. She escaped 5 years later.
I mean, I was sold for money. I was traded for a motorcycle. I was traded for leather chaps. And that was like all I was worth.
For Susan Billig, the thought of her daughter in the hands of the bikers was unbearable. But that was where the leads pointed, and that was where she searched. 3 months after Amy's disappearance, her mother, Susan, tracked the outlaws to Orlando, 160 miles away.
Hi.
There she questioned dozens of people. Finally, the manager of a convenience store told Susan that Amy had come in several times, always escorted by at least 2 bikers.
How long ago?
Oh, I don't know, maybe a month or so. She came in here a couple of times with some guys.
Did she say anything to you?
No. But I remember her because she was, each time she came in, she bought vegetarian vegetable soup. And that stuck out in my mind.
Vegetarian soup.
That's her.
A small but stunning
This
detail.
is very important to me.
Amy had been a committed vegetarian, and Susan was now convinced that she had picked up Amy's trail.
Miami Police Department?
Sure.
Thank you very much.
I'll do whatever if I see her again.
Thank you.
Hope you find her.
Thanks.
However, another year and a half would slip by before Susan got another significant lead. On January 9th, 1976, Amy's 19th birthday, a biker whom we will call Dave contacted Susan after seeing this picture in a newspaper. Dave claimed that he had actually owned Amy at one time. He agreed to talk to Susan, but only at his house and only if he drove Susan there.
I thought I might never see my husband again when I got on the back of the bike. I thought I would never see Josh and never see Ned again. But I put it in the back of my head, and I got on the bike, and I went.
Nobody better follow us back here, lady.
He was very nervous about it. He kept looking out the window to see if I had been followed.
Just look at this picture and tell me if that's her.
Wow. That's her. That's her.
Can you tell me about her? Can you describe her so I'll know that you know her?
Yeah, when I first bought her, she had lumps and was all drugged out and didn't talk.
He said she was quiet, that she didn't speak to anybody, that she was afraid of everybody. He said she was like mute, and the word kept coming up in descriptions of her through everything.
And there was a scar down here.
The most pertinent information that he gave me was that Amy had a scar, and it was a scar that was hidden on her body that I had never divulged to the police or the press or anyone.
You've got to help me find her. You're my last hope.
All right, when I went into the joint, I left her and my bike with a bro. I gotta find him.
When you find them, I've got to see her. I've got to talk to her.
We'll see.
No, I have to see her.
I said, we'll see. Let's go.
I wanted to kill him. I wanted to tear pieces out of his skin, but I didn't, because it was important for me to relate to him on a one-to-one level. Otherwise, I would never find Amy.
Susan could do little but wait while Dave made cautious inquiries. Finally, he called with dramatic news. Amy was with the outlaws in Tulsa, Oklahoma, some 1,200 miles away. Susan agreed to meet him there to press the search for Amy.
We were concerned about her safety. We were concerned about the investigation. We didn't think it was a good idea, but it was impossible ever to try to discourage her from following up every lead, no matter how dangerous. She didn't care.
June 1976, Tulsa. Amy had been absent now for more than 2 years, and the moment Susan had long dreamed of seemed to be at hand. Dave told Susan that Amy would be delivered to them at a tavern in the roughest part of town.
Amy's in there. I want her to see me.
I was extremely excited. I called home and I packed my bags at my hotel because I thought I'd have to run to the airport with her. And we went to this dark bar where there were just bikers and people drinking, drunk and everything. And he sat me down somewhere and then he walked away from me.
Right back. I gotta talk to some people.
A few minutes after he walked away from me is when all hell broke loose in that bar. I was afraid that I was going to be killed.
Susan was hustled outside, where as if by plan, a taxi was waiting to whisk her back to the hotel.
No! Amy!
If Amy had been anywhere near the bar, Susan never caught a glimpse of her. And Susan never again saw Dave, although she learned that both his knees had been broken during the brawl.
And of course, at this point, he didn't want to help me anymore, but he did say to my attorney that the only information that he would give me is that he has heard that Amy was possibly in Seattle at this point.
In November of 1977, Susan went to Seattle, even though she had suffered a heart attack just 2 months earlier. Susan began to frequent tawdry bars, tattoo parlors, and motorcycle shops.
I showed lots of photos to street people, to shop owners, to topless dancers. And I said, look, there's no police involved. It's just me. I want my child back. If you have any information, please help me. And you have to understand, these people all have mothers, and that's how I affected them.
Several people recognized photos of Amy, and they described her as always quiet, as if she were mute. But in the end, Susan returned home empty-handed. 18 more months would pass before news of Amy surfaced again. It was the dead of winter in 1979, the 5th year of Amy's absence. An anonymous mail caller claimed Amy was at a remote truck stop just outside Reno, Nevada, and that she desperately needed help.
The information was that I'm here now, I know who Amy BILLIG is, I know she's been beaten up, she's been drugged, and she's here now at this truck stop. And if you want her, you come get her now, because her life could be in danger. Just respond, you might be able to find her.
FBI agents learned that a biker gang had indeed been at the truck stop briefly. but there was no way to verify whether Amy had been with them. Years passed, a decade, still no word of Amy Billig. Then in 1992, a full 18 years after Amy disappeared, Susan was contacted by Virginia SNYDER, a private investigator in Florida.
Tell me more. I want to hear about
Play
this.
music?
Yes.
SNYDER had stunning news from England, halfway around the world, that stirred hopes Amy Billig might still be alive. A British investigator had been working with SNYDER on an unrelated case. According to SNYDER, her colleague was in a post office in Falmouth in the south of England when he was approached by an American biker.
Hey, Pops.
Yes?
You look like you could use a little companionship.
I'm afraid I don't quite understand you.
Look, I got a girl for you. It won't cost you much. What do you say?
The investigator, being a good investigator, engaged the man in conversation, as far as I could gather, to get as much information as he could about the girl that was being offered to him. Then, of course, he didn't buy her. He wasn't interested. And then he passed the information on to me.
It's very interesting, but well, what kind of a girl is she? American girl or English?
American girl.
Oh.
Oyster Bay.
Really? That's very
Oyster Bay, New York, was the birthplace of Amy Billig.
What's her name?
Mute.
Once again, the word mute had surfaced in connection with Amy.
Perhaps you have a photograph you could show me?
It sounded like Amy. And the fact that they called her mute really affected me. Because here, all these years of my search, she had been mute, had not talked. And here I was faced with the same situation, but in another country. I didn't know what to do.
Well, what kind of a girl is she?
Tragically, 1 year after his strange encounter, the British investigator passed away. The tantalizing incident became just another painful near miss in the endless search for Amy Billig.
Some people speculate that Amy Billig would be dead, but she's a young woman. She would be in her late 30s. If she survived the first 4 years, that would be the hardest. And I think she's survived. That makes me believe she's still alive. I also feel that the information that we have from over there coincides so much with the information about Amy over here that I believe she's still alive.
It's unlikely that she would be alive after all these years, unless she is still making them good money. She could still be doing something with drugs or prostitution or dancing. But again, I don't know the physical backbone of Amy Billig. If she's a strong individual and she has a strong will, she could survive.
When we return, viewer tips bring about an unexpected family reunion and the mystery of an enigmatic recluse who left a substantial estate that is still unclaimed. Perhaps someone watching is his heir. In November of 1945, a young woman named Dorothy Johnson and her 11-month-old daughter were on a cross-country train heading to Utica, New York.
Hey, beautiful.
Dorothy was just 17, single, and struggling to make ends meet. On the train, she met a young sailor named Donald Caffrey.
When we get to Utica, I'm gonna have to put her in a foster home.
Donald, who was on his way to Omaha, Nebraska, proved to be patient and sympathetic, more than willing to listen to Dorothy's troubles.
I'm sorry.
I talked quite a bit to her.
It's okay.
And
I'm gonna get a job and...
as we started getting closer to Omaha, I asked her if she'd like to have me take the baby home with me till she got settled and could send for the baby, or maybe I could bring it to her. And she agreed on that.
A few days later, Dorothy wrote to Donald that she wanted her baby back. However, when circumstances prevented Dorothy from returning to Omaha, Donald and his wife adopted the infant and named her Sandra. When Sandra was a teenager, she learned the truth about her background and began to look for her birth mother.
I think she got scared. I think she wanted me, but I don't think she had any help, maybe from her family, to help her try to get back to me.
On the night of our broadcast, Sandra Lee Nelson's long search came to a bittersweet end. A viewer called our phone center with the sad news that Dorothy Johnson had passed away in 1968. However, Sandra was overjoyed to learn that she had an Uncle Mickey and two aunts, Jan and Alice, who had always wondered about Sandra and were anxious to meet her. A month later, on December 28, 1993, Sandra and her husband Chet arrived in Syracuse, New York to receive a most remarkable Christmas gift. A house full of relatives waiting to meet Sandra for the very first time.
I didn't think I'd ever find anyone. It just gave me chills. It just made me feel real warm. Like, oh, gee, what a nice family.
This is Dorothy and Harold. That's
Dorothy and Wayne.
That's Wayne. That's it. This is supposed to be
Sandra and her new family began to compare notes on Dorothy Johnson's life. Although Sandra was unable to learn the identity of her birth father, she did discover that in the early 1950s, Dorothy had married a man named Wayne Rogers. Sandra now would like to find Wayne Rogers in the hope that she can fill in the remaining gaps in her past.
Now, this is the only picture I have of me. I'm getting little bits and pieces from friends and relatives telling me a little bit about her, and which, you know, these little things mean a great deal to me. I have found a family, a wonderful family that I never thought I'd ever have. This is the best holiday.
One more hug.
Okay. It's the best time in my life.
You would think that a willing relative could always be found to step forward and claim an inheritance. But every now and then, even exhaustive research will fail to turn up any heirs whatsoever. Tonight, the case of a mysterious man named Walter Rice, who left a legacy of unanswered questions and an estate worth nearly $145,000. Walter Rice lived alone in a modest trailer on Oak Street in McCormick, South Carolina. No one ever came calling, and Walter seemed to prefer it that way.
Walter Rice was quite a mystery man. Apparently, he was just a reclusive person. He kept to himself. He didn't have anything to do with his neighbors. He never ventured out to meet any of his neighbors.
On January 25, 1992, Walter took a cab home after his own car had been wrecked in a traffic accident. Sometime during the next week, Walter suffered a heart attack and died before he could summon help. Incredibly, a full year would pass before Walter's body was even noticed. The power company and the cable TV company turned off service to his trailer. Eventually, the post office began to stamp his mail, return to sender. In a bizarre, improbable twist, it was two strangers who finally made the discovery. Two strangers who weren't exactly on a social call.
Two people attempted to break into the trailer. They broke in the front window and then went around to the back door, and his body was laying right at the back door. They were frightened away after finding his body, and sometime later, now this could be a month or two later, they got a girlfriend of one of the people who attempted to break in to call the police department to notify them that there was a dead body in the trailer on Oak Street.
Walter Rice was 73 years old when he passed away. Judge Kidd took on the task of sorting through Walter's possessions.
I started looking through his papers, all of his effects in his trailer, to hopefully find something that would lead me to a relative. I spent some time on it every day. I became almost obsessed with it. It's been very frustrating not being able to find a relative when at first I thought it'd be so easy. Initially, I didn't expect to find anything of value, but after searching through Walter Rice's personal effects papers, bank papers, I found him to have an estate of approximately $140,000. That includes his lot and trailer.
The judge began to piece together the few known facts of Walter's life. Pay stubs showed that from 1973 to 1983, Walter worked as a cook at the Griswold Inn near Essex, Connecticut.
Mr. Rice, you know what tonight is, don't you?
Yes, I know what tonight is. Saturday night.
That's right.
During those 10 years, Walter lived virtually without expense in a dorm for hotel employees, and authorities believe this arrangement allowed him to amass a small fortune in spite of his modest wage. Surprisingly, none of Walter's co-workers could tell Judge Kidd very much about it, though they had worked side by side for a decade.
It was interesting, and I found in his personal effects indications that he had been to 2 different hospitals, a hospital in Augusta and also in Abbeville.
On the Augusta hospital forms, Walter listed a niece, Jane, as next of kin. However, the name Jane Rice appears in no other official records.
Okay, could you fill out this form, please?
At the Abbeville Hospital, Walter listed a James Edwards, but Edwards has proven to be a neighbor, not a relative. Walter Rice was born July 6, 1920, in Abbeville, South Carolina, to Edward and Amanda Rice. He was the youngest of 8 children. There is no record that Walter ever married, and if he had no children, any nieces and nephews who survived him would inherit his $140,000 estate. When we return, a school teacher is asked to testify against an accused auto thief, but just before the trial, he disappears without a trace.
Yeah. Let me show you the motor. Okay.
Buying cars, polishing them up, tinkering until they run smooth and easy. Cars with a Passion of Oliver Munson, a school teacher from Baltimore, Maryland. In January of 1983, Oliver acquired the car of his dreams, a fully loaded Datsun 240Z.
So you like? Yeah. You have the title and registration? Yeah, you got my money? Yep. I gave you 2.
Oliver had no idea that Dennis Watson, the man who sold him the car, was the ringleader of a sophisticated car theft operation. Oliver's new 240Z had been stolen 3 months earlier.
You my man or the proud owner of a Z.
Thanks,
enjoy it. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Yeah. Listen, you have any problem with it over the next week or 2, couple weeks, you give me a call, you bring it over to the shop, I'll take care of it for you.
Okay.
Watson's garage was just a cover for his chop shop, where stolen cars were dismantled and sold for parts, or simply resold with faked ownership papers. For weeks, authorities have been quietly gathering evidence against Watson. On March 16, 1983, they decided to put him out of business.
What's the summary, right? Play straight. Oh, what the hell is this, man? You can't come out here. I got a search warrant for your garage. Come out of here. This is my place. Get him out of here.
Okay, we're looking for registration plates, VIN plates, and ownership documents, titles for vehicles.
Police recovered illegal titles, partially dismantled autos, and stolen vehicle ID tags. Everything they needed to make a case against Dennis Watson.
5 Maryland plates. 5 Maryland tags.
One of the names that popped up in the confiscated records was Oliver Munson.
We continue to check paperwork. We find that Oliver Munson has a Z car. We go out, and the Z car is parked there. Attempted to contact Mr. Munson, nobody home at the house. Not knowing at that time whether or not Oliver Munson had bought this car or if he was involved with Dennis Watson. And as a result, we took the car as evidence until such time as we could continue an investigation to determine what exactly was his knowledge of the car.
Oliver Munson was notified, and later Detective Goodwin questioned him in person.
Hi, you Oliver Munson?
Yeah.
I'm Detective Goodwin with Baltimore Police Auto Theft Unit.
You guys took my car. What, did I have tickets or something?
No, sir. The car was stolen. It's a stolen vehicle.
Oh, no, I paid for the car.
How much did you pay for the car, sir?
$1,200 and some trades.
And who did you buy the car from?
Dennis Watson.
Dennis Watson? Do you know this Dennis Watson, or have you ever dealt with him before?
No, I never met him before.
My feeling was at that time, and still is, that he had bought the car, thinking that the car was, in fact, a legitimate car.
So I have to go to court?
Yes, sir. You will have to go to court and testify to the fact of how you got the car.
According to Detective Goodwin, Oliver was nervous about testifying, but agreed, knowing that he really had no choice.
If you have any questions, you can call me, okay?
Nearly a year passed. Dennis Watson's trial was looming, and Oliver was scheduled to testify on February 16, 1984. 3 days before the trial, Oliver was seen just before he left for work at around 8 a.m. Oliver turned onto Orpington Road and simply vanished.
Oliver would rarely miss school, and on that particular Monday, when he didn't arrive, some of the staff and the kids started to worry that this is not a usual practice for Oliver, and maybe something was, occurring, something was wrong with him.
Oliver's brother James telephoned through the night, but got no answer.
Oliver, you in here?
The next day, he was worried enough to visit Oliver's house himself.
Oliver, it's me, James.
When I went over to the house, I didn't have a sense of what was going on. I just thought maybe that he was sick, and I didn't know if he was unconscious or whatever in the house. I didn't know.
3 days passed with no word from Oliver Munson. Then Oliver's car was found abandoned just a few blocks from his home. One tire was flat. School papers and a bag lunch were on the front seat, but there was no evidence to indicate what had happened to Oliver Munson.
At that time, I felt that there was something wrong. Then the decision was made here that we were looking at a kidnapping or a homicide.
Dennis Watson became a focal point of the ensuing investigation. Only then did police discover that this wasn't the first time something had happened to a witness in a case against Dennis Watson. In 1973, a man named Clinton Glenn burned to death in a vehicle that was registered to Watson. Glenn had been scheduled to testify against Watson in an armed robbery trial the very next day. Based on the testimony of another witness, Watson was indicted for Glenn's murder. However, this key witness suddenly died of a suspicious drug overdose, and the murder charges were dropped. Now, Oliver Munson had vanished, but there was no evidence to implicate Dennis Watson, and he was never charged with a crime in connection with the disappearance. The Munson investigation stalled until police heard from a man named Hilton Solomon.
Officer, can you help me? I was just driving along, and all of a sudden I see my car. I reported it stolen. And
Solomon's car had been stolen just hours before Oliver Munson disappeared. Inside the car, Solomon had found a hat that would later be identified as similar to one owned by Oliver Munson.
Here's my driver's license.
Hilton Solomon took his car home after it was released by Baltimore City, and several days later he decided to clean the car. While he was cleaning, he found several receipts from a video store. On these receipts was the name Oliver Munson. We went down and looked at the car. There was a brownish stain on the carpet front right-hand side of the vehicle. Looked underneath of the seat, right by the track of the right-hand front seat, I found a spent cartridge case.
Red smudges were also found on one of the receipts. Tests revealed that the stains were human blood, type O positive. This finding strongly suggested that Oliver had met with foul play, But with no records showing Oliver's blood type and no other hard evidence, the official investigation ground to a halt. As it turned out, Oliver's disappearance had no apparent effect on the outcome of the trial. Watson pled guilty and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was paroled in 1989 after serving half his term. Meanwhile, Oliver's friends and family have spent year after painful year without him.
It's been nearly 10 years since Oliver disappeared, and the kids at school, the ones who I keep in contact with, they'll always ask. That's one of the first things. And I don't know. I don't have any answer to give to them.
In the last 10 years of my brother's disappearance, it's been a burden on the whole family. Today, my mother is gone. She worried every day. Every night she prayed and cried, wondering about where her first son is. If anyone know or seen anything that day, please help the family to get the burden off their chest.
Next, a woman who was given up for adoption more than 50 years ago needs your help to find her birth mother. During the Great Depression, drought transformed the fertile plains of America's heartland into a desert. Thousands of families were forced to abandon their homes and roam the country in search of jobs. This is a story of a young woman named Rosemary Ledbetter. In the mid-1930s, she and her family apparently left Texas and joined the faceless army of migrant farm workers.
Water? Sure, it's over there.
In 1938, Rosemary found herself in Pauls Valley, Oklahoma for the cotton harvest. She was unmarried and working up to 14 hours a day when she learned that she was pregnant.
Are you sure you're gonna be okay?
Yes, I just think I need to sit here for a little bit.
When Rosemary could no longer work in the fields, she packed her meager belongings into a single suitcase and hitched a ride to Oklahoma City. Alone and with nowhere else to turn, she sought refuge in a shelter for unwed mothers called the Home of Redeeming Love. On July 16, 1938, Rosemary gave birth to a daughter and placed her for adoption. Today, that daughter is a grown woman who can sympathize with a difficult decision Rosemary made more than 50 years ago.
I don't think she had any choices. And I thank her for thinking of me. And I had parents that adopted me that I know they also thanked her.
In August of 1991, Meredith Atkinson, accompanied by her husband, returned to the place of her birth looking for information about her biological mother.
I have many relatives that say, "Why are you trying to find out? Your parents loved you." And I said, "I know this, but it has nothing to do with them loving me. I need to find out for my own sake."
Meredith had grown up in Oklahoma and Kansas, an only child doted upon by warm and loving parents. She never got the slightest hint that there was anything unusual about her background until 1990, when a relative revealed that Meredith had been adopted. Meredith immediately tracked down her original birth certificate. She learned that the name given to her at birth was Mary Ann Ledbetter. Her father was listed as unknown. Her mother's name was Rosemary Ledbetter.
Meredith, I'd like for you to keep in mind that with adoption, confidentiality is always very important.
In Oklahoma, Meredith was told that state laws prevented the opening of adoption files.
Adult adoptee. So today I'm only
But a
able to
social
share
worker
with
did
you
provide
now.
Meredith with limited information.
I believe it can give you a good feel for your birth mother.
I found out that my mother was of Irish and German descent. I found out that she had one sister and 4 brothers. They were field workers. They had to move and follow crops, just trying to get by. And I thought about this, I could see her life and how rough it was. And it hurt me to think that she maybe had a life like this.
You may need it after you see the surprise we got from Oklahoma today.
Meredith and her husband returned to their home in Arizona to continue the search. Several months later, Meredith was elated when the home mailed her a copy of a letter Rosemary had sent there a half a century earlier.
Sunday, August the 25th, 1940. Dear Madams, I have been wanting to write sooner, but have never got around to it. I'm introducing myself.
I'm Rose Marie Ledbetter. I was with you all in 1938. My baby girl, Mary Ann, was born July 16th, 1938. I wonder by any chance if you could send me a picture of my baby girl. I would not ask or wish for anything more. I would appreciate it very much. Thank you, Miss Rose Marie Ledbetter.
I knew then that my mother was interested in me. She had been thinking of me even after I was born. I would like to be able to look at her and tell her, Mother, I understand. I know you had to do what was best for you, and that I'd like to know you. I'd like to get to know you.
As a direct result of our broadcast, a private investigator named Glenda Allen contacted Meredith and volunteered to take on the search. Just 1 month later, Meredith received the exciting news. Her mother, 78-year-old Rosemary LUTTMER, had been found. Though she's been in failing health for several years, Rosemary was anxious to see her long-lost daughter. In September of 1994, Meredith and her 2 children traveled from Arizona to Canute, Oklahoma for the much-anticipated reunion.
Hi there, Walter. Walter. Glad to know you, Walter.
Meredith's Uncle Walter, Rosemary's brother, answered the door.
And I met this. This is Rose.
Yeah.
Hi, Rose. You?
Yes.
I'm Mary Ann.
Yeah.
You know Mary Ann?
Yeah.
I'm so tickled. I think that finding my mother and seeing her and her family has brought closure to my life. I needed this.
You were even a great grandma. Do you know that?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just tickled to death she's here. Yeah, I just wish we was closer together. We could visit a little more often, you know, but I plan to go through there and visit her in Arizona when I go see my brothers, you know, that way. Be kind of on the way up there. Might be a little out of the way, but it'd be worth it.
It's like gaining a new family, and you know, it's like gaining new friends too.
Well, Albert, I think you and I look alike too.
I absolutely am going to be overjoyed to write to them and talk to them and get to know them.
Do you care if I call you Mother?
No.
No.
Next week on Unsolved Mysteries. In 1992, 18-year-old Andre Jones, the son of a local civil rights worker, was arrested at a routine police checkpoint in Brandon, Mississippi. Within 36 hours, Andre's parents were informed that he had been found hung in the shower stall of his jail cell. The death was ruled a suicide, but Andre Jones's family believes he was murdered. More than 60 years ago, a pair of prospectors in Wyoming happened upon the mummified remains of a tiny human being. X-rays later revealed what appears to be a fully developed skeleton just 17 inches tall. For some, the mummy was proof that a legendary race of supernatural beings known as the Little People actually existed. The skeptics, however, are far from convinced. Join me next time for another intriguing edition of Unsolved Mysteries.
Thank you.